Yeah. Namaste, everyone. Welcome back to our channel. And today we have a very special guest, Sam Geppi. Namaste, Sam. Welcome back to our channel.
Namaste, Nav. Nice to see you.
So
Excited
good
to
to
talk
see.
about what we're going to speak of today. It's a really fun topic.
Yeah, the topic is the most confusing planets for 12 zodiac signs and the confusion about them.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it's the most confusing planet. It's one planet for each of the 12 signs. So regardless of what sign you are, if you're Leo, Scorpio, all the 12 signs I'm going to go through, and I'm going to explain the one planet that's the most confusing. And I'll show you why. It's because here's a chart here. This is like a grid, but we have these 12 different signs, and there's one that's most confusing. And it's one that is a natural benefic planet, which means one of the good ones, quote, things we like, but it's what's called a functional malefic. So this makes us confused a little bit, where we want this thing like Venus, I want happiness and beauty, and the moon, I want love and this or that, whatever. But now that I got it, why don't I want it? Or why is it difficult or confusing? So that's the concept of what we're going to be talking about. Anything you want to share about that first and ask about?
No, I'm super excited for you to explain. And if I have any questions, I can ask as you're speaking and explaining them.
And you're a Scorpio, was it?
Scorpio Ascendant.
Okay, we got a good one in store for you.
Oh, okay. I'm excited.
So, and again, this is one of those things where I really love these kinds of teachings because it actually winds up teaching a whole bunch of different things. It teaches about the nature of the planets, each of the planets, especially as a gentle or a cruel planet. And again, that's a very important aspect. But then it also adds nuance because, again, we can tend to think that a gentle or a cruel planet means a good or a bad one. It's not really good or bad, it's gentle and cruel. Because, again, like we say here, many times those gentle planets, especially when they're functional malefics, can be certainly more confusing, but even bring more damage because of the desires and all of that stuff with them. So again, there are certain things that can really teach a lot of principles at once, and that's what this is. So we'll be talking about each one of the planets, and then we're going to go through each one of the signs, and then reveal this kind of nuance, and it's so it winds up kind of also bringing in house rulerships and stuff, because that's what the functional nature is based on. It's based on the houses that the planets rule. So without getting too dense, just to give that kind of foreshadowing that even though it's a simple thing, the most confusing planet, it's confusing because of a lot of different things, and that's what confusion is. We're all full of inner conflicts and confusion. If everything was that simple, then every relationship would make us happy. Every one who everything would be that simple, right? Everything that's difficult would be bad. Well, but it's not. Things that are difficult are sometimes the most rewarding. Things that we want so much are sometimes the worst things in the world. So that's what confusion really is on some level. So it says here, what is your sign? It says, whatever it is, there's at least one planet that is the most confusing for you. And it's usually a natural benefic as a karaka, and that's what Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, or Venus is. That's the natural status of the planet, the natural karaka. But a functional malefic as a house ruler, because again, the planets also rule houses, and those houses can be difficult or stressful, right? We know about the 6th, 8th, and 12th houses, Udushtanas. Actually, 2 of those houses are actually neutral. But but the 3rd house, the 6th house, the 11th house, other houses are functionally cruel, right? So you can have one of these planets that's a natural benefic, a gentle planet, but it rules one of these difficult houses, and it shows a difficulty that comes to bear. And again, one of the things about this idea, though, is that it also allows us to go back to these natural qualities of the planets as well, which are very important. As you see here, the sun, father, soul, but it's a cruel energy. The sun feels cruel because it burns things off, right?
Mhm.
Just like when you get burned, right? Now it purifies, but it has that cruel energy of separating. It's a separating factor, whereas like the moon is a integrating factor, right? And so, the moon is the mother mind, it's gentle and it brings love, right? And again, we could say, well, that's a good one and the other one is a bad one. Not necessarily, because there could be too much of that. The moon, it also brings that longing and that craving and that desire for that thing, right? All of us, all these emotions to feel good and to merge, that's also the moon. So again, it's not as good and bad as it might seem. So, but these gentle and cruel energies are also very important, especially when we get into looking at these confusing aspects of planets. Mars, courage, siblings, it's a cruel energy. And again, I don't think I have Mars as any of the confusing planets, not Mars or Saturn, because they're unambiguous. The problems with Mars we see. We're fighting, we're arguing, and we get it. Okay, I get it. The problems with Saturn, we see it. We're not really confused. I'm fearful, I'm frightened, I'm afraid, I'm manipulative. That's not confusing. It might be difficult, but it's not confusing. That's why this is the confusing one. So again, Mars is a cruel energy. It's about victory, winning. Mercury, speech, friends. It's a gentle planet. Want to have fun. But let's face it, we can have too much fun, and fun that just kind of distracts us from where we're trying to go. But again, while we're having fun, we're like, oh no, this is good. I want this. I want this. And then we wind up like, how did I get here? And that's the sort of, potential confusion. Jupiter brings meaning, children. It's a gentle planet that also brings hope. I feel good about this thing. Oh, I'm listening to this video. It's inspiring. I feel good about it. Venus, again, happiness, partners. It's a gentle planet, right? It brings joy. We like the things that we get from the gentle planets, and the cruel ones we tend to not like it so much. Saturn, boundaries, elders, cruel. It's about struggles. Ugh. We're not confused about that. It's like, oh, that's so hard. I feel insecure. I made a mistake. I'm embarrassed. We know what that is. And then the nodes are hidden power, and they're also cruel, and they bring confusion. So, the cruel nature of the nodes comes because they bring confusion just by nature. But even then, that's not confusing to us in this context, because when we're confused, again, the biggest problem is we don't know we're confused. So the nodes are a little more, and in this context, the nodes are more modifying influences. But as you see, we have these laid out, and all of these on this on this chart we have here. This is actually all of the house rulers for all of the ascendants. So as you see, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, we're just going to go down, and this is the most confusing planet for each one. And you see, it's all of these functional or these natural benefics: Mercury, Jupiter, Moon, Venus, and I'm sure you went right down, Nav, to Scorpio to find Mercury.
I did.
You jumped right to it, I'm sure. I'm sure everyone watching this jumped right to their most confusing planet. Which is good. This is why it's really interesting, because we can really learn something about each of the 12 signs, each of the planets, each of the houses, because again, this is really what makes it confusing for us.
Yeah, because my Mercury Dasha that I'm currently in, almost finishing, was good in some ways, but it wasn't great, even though Mercury is exalted in the chart, So that is maybe the confusing one for me, for Scorpios, the Mercury Dasha. Yeah.
Well, you're a good case study then, because and in your case, you're a good case study of, even though it's a confusing energy, the thing that also really, sorry, this microphone is over here. One second.
Mhm.
The thing that really also benefits is that the dignity of the planet. Look, we're talking about one aspect, just that nature is going to be confusing in a specific way, and it's in the way that I mentioned, because again, Scorpio, we'll just jump ahead here a little bit, but Scorpio is about that focus and concentrating that energy. It's an emotional sign. It's about strengthening our emotional responses, and again, Mars, the moon, and Jupiter are the three Dharma planets, because it's wanting to connect to the heart. Mercury is like all these ideas. So again, but we like it. We like all the ideas. But again, even when he's exalted, we're having good ideas. It would be your 11th house ruler exalted in the 11th. Look at what we're doing right now, right? Your public persona, your service. But then there's a feeling of like, okay, but is it taking me away? Is it distracting me from something else that I need to be more concentrated on, more devotional? Because Scorpio is a devotional sign more than anything. And Mercury is not. Mercury is intellect. And you see these things come out based on the rulerships. The functional nature, because it rules the 8th and the 11th house. And it's that gentle planet. It's a gentle planet. It's not a cruel planet. So we like it. And even if it's not exalted, Scorpios love their Mercury. Oh my God, everybody loves Mercury. Everybody loves to play around with their interest and talk about the things. Everybody likes Mercury. Everybody likes Mercury, Venus, the moon, Jupiter. We love it. We kind of live for it. Right? So again, this is the
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I agree. And that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like for me, I'm a Gemini, so it's Gemini winds up being the moon, which I'll get to, but I'll go through each one of these, and you'll start to see the patterns here. But before I do, I just want to also say that these principles are also taken right from Brihat Parashara Horasastra, and the chapter in Brihat Parashara Horasastra, which talks about the nature of the planets as house rulers. By the way, this book, my first book, The Ascendant, I talk about all of those things where I talk about each ascendant, each rising sign, as the aggregate of every planet as a house ruler. So instead of seeing Aries as just, and that's what this chart is, instead of seeing Aries as just one sign, it's where Venus rules the 2nd house and the 7th house, where Mercury rules the 3rd house and the 6th house, et cetera, et cetera. So that only happens with one sign. So, and there are very specific rules in Brihat Parashara Horasastra which describe the nature of the houses. And houses 3, 6, and 11, those three are the cruel houses, right? 8 and 12 aren't. They're actually moksha houses where we're just supposed to let go of things. But letting go of things is half of life. We get things, we let go of things. Moksha isn't cruel. It might not feel good to us because it feels like loss, but they're not cruel. Cruel means attachment, desire. That's what the cruel is. The word is trishadaya, but it's actually attachment and desire. So instead of it leading to dharma and truth, those planets lead to more attachment, more delusion, and especially, fighting, arguing, and things like that. So what you'll notice here with most of these is that it's one of these planets, these gentle planets, that also rule one of these cruel houses that brings attachment and a lot of difficulty. So with Aries, it's Mercury. Mercury rules 2 of them. It rules the 3rd and the 6th house. So for Aries people, Mercury is that most confusing planet, because it's like, again, Aries is about getting somewhere. It's ruled by Mars, which has more to do with, again, arguing, or victory is really the thing. It's not necessarily arguing, but it's victory, winning. That's really what Mars is about, winning, and particularly Aries. And so Mercury using Mercury to win is more like an argument, because Mercury's nature is not to try to win, it's to understand. not win. Mercury's not interested in winning, it's interested in understanding. Mars is interested in winning, Mercury in understanding and gathering information. So this, for Aries person, Mercury shows up as like, oh yeah, here I am, I'm winning this battle of ideas. So why isn't it really taking me anywhere except arguing? that
Yeah.
So it's quite, but they enjoy it. Aries people, they love a good argument. Mercury, third and sixth house ruler, he's ready to do it.
I have a Aries brother. I have a brother who's Aries rising.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
And it's confusing. And here's the thing to understand as I go through, it's confusing because the person is like, how did that happen? And again, to Aries person, it's like, I'm just telling you how I feel. I'm just expressing myself to them. By the way, to Scorpio as well. Scorpio also has to be careful with Mercury because it's ruled by Mars. And you come off, I say you because you're Scorpio, but Mars ruled people come off a lot more combative than they realize. Much more confrontational than they realize. That's why it's confusing. So this is the idea of it, because just the nature of Mars ruled people is to see things as this or that, as not a confrontation, but as a battle against something, right? And Mercury is part of the thing to do battle, right? And so, so Mars ruled people can be much more confrontational than they realize and tend to like back people into corners very easily with ideas. And again, I always notice like the beginning of the conversation is already a confrontation. Like they've already gathered some evidence and said, okay, so you said that and you said that, so and like that's the beginning of the conversation. It's like, wait a second, you want to talk? Like you don't start having already figured it all out. I'm not saying you personally, but I'm saying when Mars and Mercury interact, this is what can happen. The person has already figured out, I'm right, you're wrong, now fight your way out of this corner. It's like, so this is how Mercury, by the way, for both Aries and Scorpio, you have Mercury as this most confusing planet. And again, to them, they don't realize that's what it sounds like or how it comes across often for Mars ruled people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good points. Yeah, does
Yeah.
make sense.
Mm-hmm. And so again, this is why it's most confusing. Doesn't mean it's bad, wrong, this, that, but the person themselves are confused. Like, what? Well, why? I'm not doing that. And they honestly don't realize it, right? So with Taurus and Libra, both with the two Venus ruled signs, Taurus and Libra, it's actually Jupiter. Again, Jupiter gives us that sense of hope, meaning, purpose. It's an abstract kind of thing. Taurus, we'll just start with Taurus, is, again, it's about practical things, it's earthy, it's about, again, enjoying things in the moment, like right here, present. Jupiter, again, gives a sense of hope and purpose and expansion. And in many ways, again, when Jupiter for Taurus people can expand things like material things, like, for example, money, or even things like food, and make them, gain weight, or make them even like philosophically, even when it expands their through their beliefs and philosophies and teachings, it then gets confusing because Jupiter tries to transcend. It rules the 8th and 11th house. Jupiter is trying to, when Jupiter comes, it's actually very transformational because we start believing in something and that takes us outside of our comfort zone, particularly for a Taurus person. Because again, the 8th and the 11th house, Jupiter transforms their comfort zone. For the Taurus especially, it's that kind of uncomfortable realization where instead of just believing everything that their family taught them, for example, now they have these other beliefs and it separates them from the herd or something like that. So even though they're inspired by this newfound religion or yoga or something, they're like, but I have to make a choice now, and these other values are now sort of in conflict. So it's that kind of energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
So I just have a quick question,
and it's
Sam.
just this last thing. And so it's confusing for them. So even though it's like, oh yes, this great teachings, then how do I integrate all this transformation into this life that I never want to change? Because Taurus, they don't want to change anything. They don't want anything to change. They like everything to stay the way it is. That's the nature of Taurus. So they try to fit that expanding wild transformation into this life, but I'm still going to have the same friends, right? Same amount of money, same amount of this, same luxury, same comfort, same everything, but now a whole new light. It's like, it's like, wait a minute. So what was your question?
Just a question, like for example, even it's a benefic planet, right? For example, for Scorpio or Aries, Mercury being the benefic planets, or for in general, for any planet, like or any ascendant. But when they're going into the dasha, and if it's confusing planet for they're going through a dasha of a confusing planet, how does it unfold usually?
Well, it unfolds like I'm describing.
Okay,
But you have
confusing.
to look at everything. You have to look at
Yeah.
like say, like the dignities and whatnot. The rulerships are, look, the rulerships are what they are. Jupiter dasha, it's not just dasha, sub dasha. We get it all the time. Everybody's been influenced by these planets their whole life. You don't have to have the Mahadasha. So Jupiter sub dasha for Taurus is going to do that. It's going to try to connect them to higher meaning, inspiration, purpose, which is trying to disrupt their illusion that everything's going to stay the same on Earth and nothing's ever going to change. And I'm still going to have the same friends and family and nothing's ever going to change. So Jupiter is disruptive in that regard, while it's bringing these things that inspire them. So the inspiration is disruptive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So how it unfolds depends on the dignity of the planet for them and all of those other factors. This is just giving, but this is giving you a very deep understanding of that, why that energy is confusing for that person. And it's really based on those rulerships, those house rulers, and how those things work. Gemini, it's the moon. Now, because with Gemini, you know, the moon rules the second house of consistent values, family, consistent values, literally, you know, daily habits, routines, doing the same things over and over again, you might say. And the moon is like, is very random. The moon is not, it's the least focused, predictable. Every day there's a new value, new values, new, who knows what's most valuable today, right? It can show this, but yet again, the moon, we feel, you know, we're following our heart when we have the moon. So again, it's not something that feels bad to the Gemini person, but it's confusing because, again, it can be hard for Gemini to hold on to things like family or even possessions or even money or ambitions and those values. You know, again, with Gemini, their values are always changing, very changeable sign. And those values, that family, those things that come as a benefit as a result of those things seem to be quite elusive because the moon rules the second house. But again, it's confusing because it's like, well, how did that happen? No, I value things. I'm valuing things. And again, but it's the moon. So it's like, it's so deep into the heart. And for Gemini, you know, they have a value system that's based on being connected to how they feel in the moment and flowing. But again, that's very emotional, psychological, subjective. And so again, second house is a very important thing because it's the stuff and the people in our life. It's literally like the aggregate of our family, those kinds of things. And Gemini always wants a lot of freedom to like move and to not be pinned down and all of that kind of stuff. Gemini has that real need to not feel, again, sort of pinned down, to feel free and unencumbered by, you know, things like even, you know, family duties, obligations. So it's one of those things where it's very confusing for Gemini, like, you know, how do I have a value system based on what I love and allow it to change constantly all the time. Like, so it's a very confusing energy. The moon is probably the most confusing energy anyway, in life, just because it's our feelings, and they're so unfocused and undirection. It's just emotions changing a lot. So when the moon is that one, it's already a confusing area of life for everyone. And so, does that make sense with Gemini?
Yes, totally.
Yeah, and again, the other ones that could have been, Venus is very much a natural benefic, and Jupiter would be the other one that might be, but Jupiter rules two angles. It rules the 7th and 10th house, and actually really gives the Gemini a lot of powerful things. It can be confusing in some sense, but not like the moon. The moon is really that confusing energy. Mars is not confusing. It's aggressive. You can feel it. Same way with Saturn, same way with the sun. So, but the moon is that, like, why do I have a hard time? Where's those solid connections that everybody else has, this anchor to their family and to their past, and it's like, I don't know, I'm here somewhere. Like, it's very amorphous with Gemini. Much harder to pin down. With Cancer, it's Venus. With Cancer and Leo, Venus is a big one. With Cancer, it's very easy to see because Venus rules that 4th house of that beautiful home I'm going to have, and that's beautiful feelings, and the beautiful, Cancer has this big, beautiful, flowery feeling in their heart of how life's just going to be so beautiful. And it also rules the 11th house of ambition, this ambition to have this beautiful life, right? And Cancer puts a lot of energy into making that beautiful home life, family, beauty thing happen. They put a lot of energy into that tangible thing that they want to create. And yet again, there's a lot of ambition that's also tied up in it with the 11th house. And again, they're often confused about, why doesn't it ever feel as good as I imagine it can feel? And there's this desire. They're much more willful and forceful about it than they realize. Again, Cancer's like, it's my home and my this, and like they're very, boy, that beautiful home they imagine is like, don't get in front of that, don't get in the way of that thing, right? And that beautiful peace of mind, that good feeling, that's what the 4th house is. And Venus is that beautiful flowery feeling. And you messed it up, you were mean to me, right? Again, Cancer can just be like, why doesn't it ever feel as good as they imagine? This is just kind of the simple thing, and that's Venus, very much wrapped up in that illusion. Because again, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, they're water signs, and they're really driven by devotion, a higher level. Venus is about desire, to have that person here, and to be experiencing this pleasure and this happiness and these desires that feel good, this desire for that. And they're actually different things. They're very different. In fact, they're kind of anathema to each other. Those desires for something, especially to possess someone or to have a relationship, that's very different than the devotion to like a child or something, which is really the deeper nature of Cancer and also Scorpio. Venus is not that energy. Venus is like the lover, like the romantic agreement, right? So it's a very confusing energy for Cancer. They get very confused around Venus energy because it looks very similar. So, and Leo is also Venus. Venus rules that 3rd house of that ego and that 10th house of power. And again, Leo is a sign of power, especially things like our career, our work. And where do we express that the most? In the 10th house. And who rules it? Venus. So again, it looks very much like, yes, this is what I want. Here I am, fulfilling my desires in the world. And again, but it helps them, and they feel good about it. And again, we have to understand that we like this thing. We put a lot of energy into that planet, into that most confusing planet. Like I said, the Cancer puts a lot of energy into that Venus thing, that happy relationship, and feels good. And that's why it's very confusing, why it always seems to be leading them to some kind of suffering a little bit because of the desire. Same way with Leo. They put everything into that career. By the way, it also rules the third house of the ego, of our desires. So again, Venus is literally the planet that gives the Leo the desire, third house, for power and status in the world, 10th house. Venus rules both. And it's Venus, so we like it. By the way, also that sort of smooth charisma that Leo has, that charm, that sort of public charm, that sex appeal even, because third house is actually very much related to sex, like animal magnetism kind of thing, right? So with Venus, when Venus rules the third house, there's a lot of that kind of energy there. So again, a lot of confusion with Leo around that, and needing to handle power and duty responsibly, because again, Leo can really abuse their authority, and again, be sort of manipulative bosses, coercing people into doing things, and very much the kind of slimy politician energy as well. Yeah, do this, and kind of charm their way into doing things to get power. Ultimately, though, it's disappointing to them because they're ruled by the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter are their Dharma planets. Their real Dharma flows through that type of energy. That good king, not the king who's trying to take and spin all the attention back on themselves and get praised. That's the Venus part, where the ego and power, they get sucked into the power of the ego. So again, but this is very confusing for Leo. Again, that's why these are most confusing planets, because we like it. The Leo, boy, they love it. They love that work. They love that, and they'll do it, right? So again, anything you'd like to say about those last couple there? Just I'll take a look.
Really interesting, yeah, Sam. Really interesting presentation, and really interesting points to see it from a different perspective. Just to, like, when you say confusing for Leo, third and 10th house, and power and status, and it's a good perspective that you put together.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's these kinds of things show the inner conflicts, and this is kind of again, it's even sort of transcendent of where the planet is, what the dignity is, all of that. This is just the nature of that energy for that ascendant. That's why so much can be known by analyzing all of the house rulers, the planets as house rulers. That's why I wrote that book a long time ago, because I was like, oh, this is actually such a deep portrait before you even get into the dasha, the dignity, where the planet is, all the other stuff. This is just a snapshot of 12 very vivid descriptions of people's motivations. And in fact, it's even much deeper than all of the specifics, because then the Leo, maybe their Venus is very powerful or whatnot. Then they'll be able, but they're still managing that same energy. It doesn't change the energy. It just changes how well they manage it, how well they deal with the thing I'm describing. These things I'm describing are real no matter what else is going on. That's what they're going to be dealing with that planet. And it's a matter of how well they manage it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you're saying that these are just like, these are there, the energies really are there, but depending where the planets actually go in their chart, particularly shows how they're managing it.
Yeah, how they're going to manage this thing I'm talking about isn't going to change. Like I said, that's what I said. That Mercury for Aries, that's built in. That's fixed karma. The fixed karma of someone who incarnates as Aries, they're going to have this nature with Mercury. That's it. It's not like they're not going to have that type of energy with it. It doesn't mean it has to be so destructive. It's going to be confusing, and they're going to have to navigate that when it's powerful, like you with your Mercury. You're a great example, right? Like you with your Mercury. It's there. Even though it brings you great benefit and you've been able to navigate it, you have to deal with the challenges there. It doesn't change the nature of what that energy is, right?
Right.
And so again, you're blessed that it's exalted. So again, now that means that that particular energy is going to have a lot of awareness. That's what's called the Jagratavashta, is awake. It's an awake state. So you're awake to seeing that. You're not just unconsciously. Frankly, one of the things that Mercury is for Scorpio can be very manipulative. That's really the biggest problem, is it can be, Scorpio can have this dark side of passive aggressive manipulation where they use Mercury to recognize all the details and the vulnerabilities, and then they know how to, frankly, again, without being mean, lie or distort the truth or use language as a way to get what they want rather than be honest. And Mercury is the energy of being honest, telling the truth, not saying what I need to say in order to get what I want. Because then once you see someone has done that, you don't trust them anymore. And then, again, this is why it's confusing for Scorpio. Why don't people trust me? Why does everybody say I'm not trustworthy? Well, because it's very easy for Scorpio to misuse Mercury. And instead of speaking correctly, use it to coerce. Again, and they don't even know they're doing it. That's why I'm saying it's a confusing energy. It's not like it's intentional. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
And so again, this is why even, that great, even the planet that's in its powerful state is going to have to pass through that awareness and recognize, oh yeah, you know what, I wasn't being honest here or whatever. That's why this thing came back. Okay, now I need to make sure to do that. And we learn eventually. But that's why, for example, with the Mercury and the Mars signs shows up that way. So let's go with, as we go into Virgo, it's also the moon. So with these Mercury ruled signs, I think it's the moon that's the most confusing. And for Virgo, the moon rules the 11th house. And you can see it's coming down to these rulerships, right? And the 11th house, again, is that it's an ambitious house. It's a cruel house. It brings attachment. And for Virgo, it's a very specific kind of thing. Virgo has this very sort of confusing relationship with the public, service, with how much to put themselves out there in the public, and what their public role is. Again, Virgo is very much about wanting to be of service, and recognizing that the larger possibility, but how exactly to do it. They can tend to, in some ways, sit back, because Virgo has a very critical nature. They can sit back and actually be somewhat, if not jealous, but somewhat kind of envious of, at least internally, of those in the public, and sit back and just kind of be sort of critics, but never really want to, but be unclear about how to step up themselves with a healthy kind of ambition. Because that's what the 11th house is. Like you have your powerful Mercury, that 11th lord in the 11th. You know what it's like to step up and actually put the thing out there, because this is going to be helpful to people, right? That sense of contribution and social duty is very important to Virgo, but it's ruled by the moon, so they're just not sure how to do it. And they're like, I'll kind of do this, and I'll kind of be in support of that person, and I'll sort of kind of support that, but I'm just here in the background. I don't want to draw too much attention to myself. So they'll kind of shirk their own sort of power. Again, because that's really what the moon is. The moon is where we're not really sure what to do. We just feel things. So with Virgo, the moon gives them that sort of public anxiety, even though this heart, and this very devotional heart that wants to be of service, that recognizes the need to step up in a higher way, but they're very emotionally confused about how to do it. So with Libra, we have Jupiter again as well. Now, this is where we start to get into this kind of shadow. Again, with Mercury, when you go up to Aries, it was Mercury that rules the 3rd and 6th house, that kind of willful, combative energy over ideas, which is Mercury. With Libra, it's Jupiter that rules the 3rd and 6th house. It's also the confusing planet. It could have also been the moon with Libra, but I chose Jupiter because I think it's a little more, it's a little less beneficial and more confusing. because again, it's similar to the way Mercury is with Aries, because Jupiter rules the third and sixth house. So it's, and again, Jupiter is about our philosophies and our principles, right? And what we believe. And Libra has this kind of, this sort of idea of, okay, I have tolerance for everyone's ideas, which is Gemini, ninth house, Mercury, where Mercury is a friend. But then people's beliefs, especially their like irrational beliefs or their religion or dogma or any kind of thing, Libra can really kind of get combative about those things. Now, again, it's Libra, so it's not aggressive, but it's the tendency in Libra to just play this devil's advocate, to just kind of bat things back and forth to sort of get some kind of tension going around the principle of the thing or the philosophy of the thing. So many times with Libra, I don't know how many times I've had it with Libra friends that I've had where they always have to just kind of keep unbalancing the scales a little bit to just keep you sort of philosophically at odds a little bit, where you're just constantly back and forth instead of just letting something resolve, right? Especially over philosophical things, and not necessarily religion, but even just the philosophy of anything. Like if you wax philosophical, like, relationships are blah, blah, blah. It would be like, the Libra would be like, well, blah, blah, blah. Even if they agree with 95% of it, the 5%, they'll get into this sort of philosophical jousting match with you. and it can also get even a little bit, aggressive. And again, it's a confusing thing as well, because they're connecting to their teachings and their philosophies, but they're doing it in a much more of an intellectual way. Again, Jupiter is about transcendent philosophies, not about intellectual jousting. And that abstract nature of Jupiter, the abstraction, just like I talked about the abstract nature of Jupiter for Taurus, is trying to destroy their orthodox value system. Jupiter is abstraction, not tangible, practical things, right? And so the abstract nature of Jupiter is what can happen is the Libra tends to play around with those ideas, but it can get very willful and confusing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We talked about Scorpio Mercury quite a bit already, but just to double down on the houses involved, again, Mercury rules the 8th and the 11th house. And again, this is similar to what we just said with Taurus and Jupiter. You could see there's a mirror with the zodiac, right? The opposite of Scorpio is Taurus. The opposite of Jupiter is Mercury. They rule opposite signs. So it's this 8th and 11th house of Mercury now from Scorpio. And again, Mercury is all those details, all those stories, the communication, all the details. And it's trying to transform those details of Scorpio into something that is more philosophical and deep and transcendent as the 8th house. And also the 11th house, which also leads to again, higher service and things like that. So again, you have it in the 11th house. But again, the other thing is that it's an ambitious energy, and Scorpio especially is much more ambitious than Taurus because it's ruled by Mars. So this is the quality, what I said earlier, where Scorpio has to be very careful with the truth, literally, and with words and language. Mercury is the words we speak, the language, how we use words. And it's remarkable how many people don't use words to speak the truth. They use words as another way to get what they want. And they don't speak truthfully. They don't speak honestly. They use words to coerce or to get what they want and say, okay, here's the thing I need to say to get what I want. But again, that might not be the truth. And once we find out someone wasn't telling us the truth, we don't trust them anymore, or we have a hard time trusting them. So we trust people that speak the truth. And that's really when Mercury's powerful, someone speaks the truth. Once we see someone didn't, then we don't trust them as much. So again, this can be very confusing with anyone where Mercury is difficult. But again, with the Mars-ruled people, it's it's this natural confusion around Mercury energy. Does that make sense?
Feel also,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also feel that sometimes people are just not conscious of the patterns they're in unless it's brought to their awareness, or they go ahead, they have some self-reflection to really know their own truth, to speak the truth. You know what I mean? Sometimes
No,
people are
that's
just
always the case.
going
Yeah.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I talk about it, and that's why I'm saying it without judgment. I'm not saying, oh, Scorpios, they're all liars or something. No, no. We don't know what we're doing. This is why it's
Yeah.
confusing. But here's the difference, Nav. Someone like you who has who has Mercury in Virgo, or let's say in Gemini, where it's powerful. This is what happens when the planet is in good dignity. Someone tells you the truth, or they recognize, or you hear the truth, or you recognize it, let's say around Mercury, which is details, and then you'll be able to go, oh, you know what? Wow, that's true. Oh my God, I do. Oh God, you know what? And we'll learn from it. When it's in good dignity, we learn from the mistake. That's what's called awake. It's the Avashta called Jagrad, which is awake. It doesn't mean we won't make the mistake. It means when we make it, we learn from it. We're awake to it. When Mercury is in worse dignity, let's say Mercury is in a place where it's not very awake. I mean, how many times can you say this to people and they'll just ignore you or justify it and argue with you, say, no, it wasn't, you're just, and they don't hear it. Like most of the time, that's what happens. Even people I'm sure watching this video, because that's all the time, they'll be like, oh, sure, beat up on Scorpio, or whatever it might be. So this is where the dignity comes in. We're going to deal with this energy. And so most of the time we'll hear and see the mistake and not learn from it and keep repeating it. So this is why what we can do with astrology is really identify this on a very deep level. So
that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying the things I'm talking about here are on a very primal level, even deeper than the dignity and all that stuff. That shows how the person's going to manage that aspect of life. But this is built in as a confusing energy that the person doesn't really understand. Because again, I can tell you, to the Scorpio, they don't know. They don't know that. They're like, well, yeah, I'm talking. What do you mean? I'm telling you. They don't even know that it's like, yeah, but you're not being honest. You don't realize that you just said this thing that wasn't true. And I've literally had them say, yeah, but if I told you that, then you would tell me this and I wanted that. And I'm like, right, that's called lying. It's called lying and manipulating. It's like, yeah, that's what it is. Like, well, if I told you the truth, then you wouldn't give me what I wanted. That's why I said that. I'm like, okay. So how do I know you're not doing that all the time? So anyway, it's literally a clueless part of ourselves at times. So again, I don't want to keep beating up Scorpio. Scorpio is the most sensitive to this too. Of all the videos that I do when I talk about things, it's always Scorpios who are like, there you go, beating up on Scorpio again. So we'll finish up here and do these last four. Sagittarius and Pisces are both Venus, okay? But we'll start with Sagittarius. Venus is often, it's the thing we really want. It's happiness, beauty, joy, even, sex, comfort, good food, all this stuff. And for Sagittarius, it rules the 6th and the 11th house. So it's a very desire-filled energy, right? The 6th house of where we can have a lot of attachment and also problems and struggles, and the 11th house of highest ambition, and again, in a good way, not because we're terrible people. That Venus shows where Sagittarius wants to spread the thing that inspires them and make everything beautiful. But again, it's a very lustful energy. It could be a very lustful energy, and Venus for Sagittarius is kind of like the archetype of the priest who winds up having a affair with a call girl kind of thing. But this kind of archetype of where Venus is very lustful, and as ruling the 11th house especially, which is the house of our highest desires. So underneath it all, even in a very neutral way, it can just be a very distracting energy. Venus, if it's not one of the Dharma energies, it can be very distracting, even for, again, like we already said, for Cancer, Leo, Sagittarius, Pisces. It's just the distractions of, oh, this shiny object, this thing is going to make me happy. An example I use of Venus for Sagittarius, or Venus and Jupiter. Sagittarius is literally like where we have a religion or a belief, and we see that it's going to take us somewhere, and we see the destination. We just have to get there, right? Sagittarius is where we see the destination, and then we start going, and then as we go there, there's all the beautiful flowers along the trail, and oh, this is beautiful, that's beautiful, oh, this is fun, oh, these people are so nice. This is all the Venus stuff. And just in general, even without terrible, difficult things, just the distraction of beauty distracting us in life. Sagittarius is about that transcendent teachings that take us beyond just our life on Earth with other people and all like that. And Venus is very much about that. That's all Venus cares about. Venus cares about being happy, enjoying ourselves, smiling, being friendly, having good food, beautiful, comforts, living a happy life. And Sagittarius is about transcending that, having these beliefs that take us beyond that. So this is why it's confusing. This is the confusion of Sagittarius. Like, well, what? I'm living a happy life. How could that not be part of what God wants for us all, or whatever it might be? And realizing that we're not putting our teachings into practice, or whatever it might be. Very confusing for Sagittarius, when they get way bogged down in all of the comforts of the world. It's confusing. Capricorn is Jupiter, which is the 3rd and 12th house ruler. Again, when Jupiter is confusing, it gives this illusion of hope and inspiration, right? And so for Capricorn, Jupiter rules the 3rd house, which is about desire and the ego, literally to want to figure things out for ourselves. And also the 12th house of loss and letting go is also the nature of Jupiter for Capricorn, because it rules the 12th house. So again, Capricorn is this very tangible, practical, very focused and methodical energy ruled by Saturn. It wants to bring the energy inward and make a commitment to the things that are real and that are, again, practical and tangible. And Jupiter, again, is all these abstraction. It's this hidden, abstract quality. Now, again, frankly, Capricorn is a very philosophical sign as well. And Jupiter rules that 3rd house, which is their creative mind. But again, it can take them out of that practical work and effort that they need to put forth. And again, because first Capricorn has to lean into that aspect of their nature more than anything else. They have to manage their, literally, things like their money and their environment. If they can't do that, then they can't really relax first. And they have to be able to manage those things, and then from there build up this kind of philosophical framework and bring those philosophies into that structure. But Jupiter can be like, I've seen many times, it can make them very ungrounded. And Capricorn needs to be grounded first. Otherwise, they're out of sorts. And again, it's actually driven by the ego. It's the 3rd house. And again, the ego isn't a bad thing. It's just the desires. And, Capricorn has this strong desire for liberation, the strong desire to be, inspired and all, which comes from Jupiter ruling the 3rd house, but it can be like ungrounded to them. It could be a waste of energy, as Jupiter also rules the 12th house. For Aquarius, it's also the moon. You see, I have these 3 air signs. Really, the moon is the most confusing. And for Aquarius, Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn, and it's where our individual identity, our egoist identity, or our separate identity is at its lowest. The ruling planet also rules the 12th house. One of the hardest things for Aquarius is, and it's shown by the moon as ruling the 6th house, is that feeling that life is hard, life is difficult, life is going to be hard, emotionally hard. And again, for Aquarius, there's this sort of confusing energy where there's a lot of humility, because ruling the 6th house gives them this kind of natural, desire for service and servitude through the heart, but then how to be rejuvenated. This is the real challenge for Aquarius, is to get a healthy sense of identity, frankly, because again, Saturn rules the ascendant and the 12th house, where they're letting go of their own personal power and identity. And the moon really reinforces this as ruling the 6th house, where this feeling of life is going to be hard, and not really wanting to show up for the battles also. Because again, the 6th house, planets that do well in the 6th house are the malefic planets, are the cruel planets, I should say. Sun, Mars, Saturn, especially, because they're fight, and the 6th house is where we need to put forth effort and energy to fix problems. And the moon has no desire to want to fix any problem. It wants to feel good, not feel like everything is hard and that there's all these problems. So the illusion for Aquarius in this context is this illusion that everything is going to be hard. It's one of the things when I talk to Aquarius, it's hard to get them out of this expectation that things are going to be difficult, that everything is going to be difficult. Every type of growth is going to be difficult because they feel the difficulty. And there's this confusion that, okay, let's say even a simple way, okay, start a new relationship, start a new career, start something new. We have to be like, okay, I'm ready. And it's like, oh, but another thing that's going to be, this feeling that's going to be hard, that everything is going to be hard. Because the moon, that feeling of effort and energy. So, and then the last one, Jupiter ruled Pisces, is also Venus, which rules the 3rd and the 8th house, similar to Sagittarius, where, again, Jupiter ruled people are looking for transcendence. Jupiter, through Sagittarius, is more like religious, following a guru, this path, this clear path. Pisces is like kind of all paths dissolve. It's more mystical, metaphysical, not as focused, but no less wanting liberation, and in fact, being much less identified. And so with Venus ruling the 3rd and 8th house, and again, the 3rd house is the house of the ego, and the 8th house is transformation, change, destruction. And it's Venus, which is about desires. And again, so all of that desire to live a happy life. And Pisces is a sign that's very aware of all of the endings, that everything is ending and dissolving, and almost feels a bit powerless about what to do about it. Because all those other signs came before. Now we're at Pisces, where it's like, I'm just a fish in this ocean. And there's this awareness of any planets in Pisces that what am I going to do anyway, especially to try to change the world and all this stuff that we wind up living in our through our separate bodies. So Pisces has to connect with that transcendent ocean. And so all of the planets, are kind of filtered through this, but with Venus, it's like, so let me just enjoy it all. And it's just kind of like the flowery fantasy, and it rules their ego. So they have very strong desires. Venus rules the 3rd house for Leo and Pisces. Remember how I talked about it with Leo? Those desires for the career, right? Okay, at least that's a place to put it. But Pisces is the desire for 8th house, like destruction. And by the way, this is also part of it that needs to be channeled. because Pisces has this desire to just kind of destroy, to see it all kind of destroyed, so then I'm free. And again, it's a very complicated sign, Pisces. All the planets have this sort of dual, frankly, all of the dual signs. Pisces and Gemini, the two most dual, unpredictable. But Pisces definitely this kind of fantasy illusion. And so again, Venus stuff very confusing for the Pisces person. Because again, with Venus, it's like, and again, remember what I said at the beginning, it's what these planets are doing is they're giving us something. It's like, it's like, what? I'm happy. Everything's fine. So it's like, I'm happy. I'm good. I have a relationship, and I have this, and I'm people around me. But again, so why am I like, don't know what I'm doing, right? So it's like with the exception, frankly, of Aquarius. Aquarius is the confusing one. That's a kind of pain in the heart energy, and in that sort of gentle way. And I would even say all of the ones related to the moon. Where the moon is the worst. Actually, I said the air signs. It wasn't with Libra. It was with Mercury. It was with Gemini, Virgo, and Aquarius. That's when it was the moon. With the moon, it's the most confusing even, and maybe the least enjoyable. Whereas the other ones, the functional benefics, we kind of are enjoying ourselves. The Aries, they really enjoy their arguments, and they tend to enjoy it. When the moon is involved, it's a little less, because the moon doesn't generate enjoyment. It generates emotions. And emotions are not the same. Like, again, Venus creates desire, which leads to pleasure, and we enjoy it. Mercury, we enjoy all of that. Jupiter, we enjoy that. The moon, we tend to not really, we're just kind of feeling our way through it with the moon. So this is the concept. Pretty interesting, huh?
Really interesting concept. Really nicely explained, Sam. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really wonderful. Really new perspective for me, because I'm just a student of astrology. It's my passion. But to get this perspective, to know, like, kind of, it's the basics, right? Like, to know about this and then going deeper into the chart. So that was very wonderful. Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. And yeah, this is a lot of my work revolves around that. Again, I wrote that first book, The Ascendant. I wrote it more than 20 years ago. So I really noticed this framework is so, it's already just sort of, it's like the DNA. Like, like I say for 20 years, the sign it's not one sign. It's this place. It's all of the house rulers measured from this point. So that sign snaps into place every planet in a completely unique way. Pisces is the only place where Venus rules the 3rd and 8th house. It's still Venus, but it only rules the 3rd and 8th house from Pisces. Now, it also rules the 3rd house from Libra, but it's a 3rd and 10th house, or etc. So every ascendant does this for every planet. So even before you look at the dignity of the planet, where it goes, again, we focus so much on that, which we have to. But underneath it all of this like framework, this architecture is already there. So yeah, I'm happy to share it, especially in things like this. This brings together a lot of those ideas.
Yes. And where is your book available if audience are interested in the book that you had written? Is it on Amazon or is it on your
it's on
website?
Amazon. I'll also give you a link where people can
Sure.
where people can get it on my website and stuff.
Perfect. Thank you. That was wonderful.
You're certainly welcome. And again, thank you very much, Nav, for doing this. Give my regards to Dr. Pai, and we'll see everyone soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you guys want me and Sam to do any more topics that you are interested in, just leave us a comment below. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Namaste.